To really get inside the situation, you have to understand the history between these two people and what their working relationship has actually looked like over time. The story of Matt and Tony is one that many people initially misread. When the channel first started gaining attention, there was a wave of speculation about how much of the success was genuinely Matt's own and how much was simply the product of having a father with decades of mechanical experience. People assumed that Tony must have been doing the heavy lifting behind the scenes, that Matt was simply the face in front of the camera, while the real work was handled by someone else. It was a narrative that spread quickly and stubbornly, the way assumptions often do when people are watching from a distance without the full picture. The reality, as it eventually became clear, was far more straightforward and far more honest than the speculation suggested. Tony had indeed spent his life working as a mechanic. That experience was real and deep, the kind of knowledge you only gain through years of actually doing the work, getting your hands dirty, solving problems that books cannot always prepare you for. But that experience was never used as a shortcut for Matt. What Tony provided was something different. He provided a place to learn, an environment where curiosity could be tested and developed, and guidance that came in the form of advice rather than interference. The actual work, the actual decisions, the actual consequences of those decisions, those all belonged to Matt. He had worked part-time jobs to fund his early builds. He had learned by doing, made mistakes, corrected them, and moved forward. Tony's contribution was the kind of support that creates independence rather than dependency, and that distinction matters enormously. This understanding of their dynamic makes Tony's recent decision even more layered. A man who has spent years being deliberately careful not to control the process has now made a move that appears to be doing exactly that, at least from the outside. But if you know the pattern of how Tony operates, you have to consider that his motivations are almost certainly not about control for its own sake. Everything about the way he has approached this partnership suggests that when he does act decisively, there's a reason behind it that goes beyond surface-level disagreement. He is not the kind of person who pulls the trigger on something without thinking it through. The fact that he has done so now, at this stage, with this particular plan, points towards something deeper. There are moments in any journey where everything seems to be moving in the right direction, and then suddenly, without much warning, the ground shifts beneath your feet. For Mat Armstrong and his growing presence in the automotive world, one of those moments arrived recently. And it came from the last place most people expected. Not from a failed build, not from a business decision gone wrong, not from a mechanical problem that could not be solved. It came from home. It came from family. More specifically, it came from Tony Armstrong, Matt's father, the man who has stood beside him through every chapter of this story. Tony made a decision that has now sent ripples through everything that was being planned. And the biggest casualty could be the Miami workshop plan that so many people have been following closely. To understand why this matters so much, you have to step back and look at where things stood before this happened. Matt had been building towards something significant. The Miami project was not just another idea thrown around in casual conversation. It represented a serious expansion, a bold next chapter in a journey that had already pushed well beyond what most people thought was possible for someone who started out the way Matt did. The plan involved setting up a proper operational base that could handle the kind of high-level builds that had become Matt's calling card. Projects like the heavily damaged Bugatti Chiron Per Sport, one of only around 60 units ever produced, had already shown that the work coming out of this team was no longer in the same category as beginner builds or simple restorations. Miami was supposed to be the next platform for that level of ambition. And then Tony stepped in. What makes this so striking is the nature of Tony's role throughout everything that has come before this moment. He has never been the kind of person who oversteps or throws his weight around unnecessarily. Quite the opposite. Over the years, as Matt's channel grew and the projects became more complex and more expensive, Tony maintained a presence that was always supportive without being controlling. He would show up when needed, offer his mechanical knowledge when a problem required it, and then step back without making it about himself. That quiet consistency became one of the most recognizable parts of the content people followed. So when someone with that kind of measured, steady approach suddenly makes a move that threatens to unravel a major plan, you have to take it seriously. This was not a casual comment or a passing concern. This was a deliberate action, and the weight of it is already being felt. The question that immediately comes to mind is simple. Why now? The Miami plan had been developing for some time. Matt had already made the trip out there personally to inspect the Bugatti, which told you everything about how committed he was to this direction. Traveling that kind of distance to look at a car in person is not something you do on a whim. It signals intention. It signals investment, both financial and emotional. The groundwork was being laid, the vision was taking shape, and the momentum was real. For Tony to pull the trigger at this particular stage, when so much had already been set in motion, suggests that whatever his concern is, it is not something small or easily dismissed. Something pushed him to act, and the timing alone tells you that he saw this as urgent. One possibility that has been discussed is that Tony's concerns are rooted in the sheer scale of what the Miami plan represents. There is a meaningful difference between doing exceptional work within a familiar environment and expanding into an entirely new operational territory. The Leicester workshop that became the foundation for everything Matt built was a space that developed over time, organically shaped by real experience and real learning. Miami would be different. It would be a new location, a new set of logistical challenges, a new financial commitment, and all of this at a moment when the project's already on the table, including the Bugatti and a crash Ferrari F43 that was acquired around the middle of the year, were already demanding enormous amounts of attention and resources. From Tony's perspective, someone who has watched this journey from the very beginning and understands what it actually takes to keep something like this functioning, the timing and the risk level may have simply crossed a threshold he was not prepared to accept quietly. There is also the matter of what it means to run an operation in a different country. The logistical complexity alone is significant. Parts, staff, regulations, costs, and the sheer distance involved in managing something across that kind of gap. All of these factors stack up quickly. Matt's strength has always been in the combination of his mechanical growth and his ability to present that journey in a way that feels real and engaging to the people watching. But expanding into Miami is a different kind of challenge. It is not just a bigger build. It is a different operational model entirely, and the support structures that made the current setup work so well may not translate automatically to a new environment. Tony's experience gives him a perspective on this that is hard to replicate. He has seen projects succeed and fail. He has seen ambition run ahead of preparation. He has seen what happens when the excitement of a new idea carries more weight in the decision-making process than the practical realities of what it takes to execute it properly. If he has looked at the Miami plan and concluded that something is not ready, or that something fundamental needs to change before it moves forward, that is not a small concern to brush aside. It is the kind of assessment that comes from decades of working through real problems in the real world, not from theory or optimism. At the same time, there is a tension here that cannot be ignored. Matt has proven himself repeatedly. The trajectory of the work he has taken on speaks for itself. The Bugatti project alone represented a leap in a territory that most people in this space would not dare to attempt. A car with that kind of rarity, that kind of mechanical sophistication, and that kind of price tag is not something you take on without confidence and capability. The fact that he moved forward with it, traveled to inspect it personally, and committed to working through every challenge it presented says a great deal about where he is now compared to where he started. He is not the same person who needed Tony's garage as a learning environment for basic builds. He has grown well beyond that, and the Miami plan likely reflects a version of Matt who is ready for the next level, even if the path to get there carries significant risk. This is where the tension between father and son becomes genuinely interesting to watch from the outside. It is not a conflict rooted in broken trust or personal friction. It is something more nuanced than that. It is the natural tension that arises when two people who genuinely care about the same outcome have different assessments of what the right next move should be. Tony's caution is real, and it comes from a real place. Matt's ambition is equally real, and it has earned its credibility through consistent delivery. The question is whether these two things can be reconciled in a way that allows the Miami plan to survive, perhaps in a modified form, or whether Tony's intervention will fundamentally reshape what happens next. There are people watching this situation who believe the plan can still be saved. The argument goes that Tony's decision, while significant, is not necessarily the final word on what is possible. If the concerns can be identified clearly and addressed directly, there may be a version of the Miami expansion that satisfies both perspectives. Perhaps the timeline changes. Perhaps the scope adjusts. Perhaps certain elements of the plan get restructured in a way that reduces the risk to a level that Tony considers manageable. None of this would be easy, and it would require the kind of honest and open communication that has always been part of how this partnership functions at its best. But there is another possibility that deserves equal consideration. Tony's intervention may ultimately prove to be exactly what this situation needed, even if it does not feel that way in the immediate moment. Some of the most important decisions in any long journey are the ones that slow things down before they go too far too fast. The history of this channel and the story of Mat's development as a builder and a creator is full of moments where difficulty turned out to be instructive rather than destructive. If Tony has seen something in a Miami plan that others have missed, something that points toward a genuine problem rather than just a manageable challenge, then his willingness to step in now, even at the cost of disrupting the momentum, may look very different in retrospect. What is certain is that this moment carries real weight. The Miami Workshop Plan was not a minor side project. It was a major strategic step, one that reflected how seriously Mat has been thinking about the future of what he is building. The emotional investment is real. The financial planning is real. The vision behind it is real. And now all of that is sitting in a genuinely uncertain place because of a decision made by the person who has been part of this story longer than anyone else. The audience that has followed this journey understands better than most that the story of Mat and Tony Armstrong has never been a simple one. It has always had layers, unexpected turns, and moments where what seemed straightforward turned out to be more complicated on closer inspection. This situation fits that pattern exactly. There are no easy answers here, and anyone who claims otherwise is probably not looking closely enough at all the moving parts. What happens next will tell you a great deal about where this partnership is headed and what the future of the operation genuinely looks like. Whether the Miami plan survives in some form, gets pushed back significantly, or is reimagined into something different altogether, the outcome will be shaped by the same forces that have defined everything up to this point. Trust built over years, experience applied with care, ambition tempered by honesty, and a relationship between two people who, whatever their current disagreement, are still working toward the same thing they have out.